Hello, I'm Attorney Todd Leneve. Welcome to West Virginia Gun Law. Today we're going to take a look at Senate Bill 3589, the Preventing Private Military Activities Act of 2024. Stick around. This bill was introduced on January 16th of this year by Democrat Senator Edward Markey of Massachusetts. It's been getting a lot of publicity on social media outlets recently, and I thought it would be worth taking a few minutes today to take a look at it and discuss it here for you. After its introduction, this bill was referred to the Senate Judiciary Committee, which is a fairly typical action with new legislation. Whether it's the Judiciary or another committee, new legislation typically gets referred to a Senate subcommittee or a House subcommittee if it's in the other chamber, for the purpose of allowing that committee's members to review the bill, take a look at how it may affect current laws here in the United States, and decide if there are any amendments that may need to be made to make it a little more effective, or to take out language or provisions that could be difficult to enforce. Once that review process has taken place, a decision is made whether or not to put the bill up for a vote for passage in that committee. The vote could go against the bill, in which case it dies there in the committee, or the vote could go in favor of the bill, which means it passes out and goes back to the Senate floor. The leadership of the Senate could then at that point refer the bill to additional committees for further study before taking a vote, or it could proceed to a vote on the full House floor. This process works the same way for a bill that's introduced in the House of Representatives, but we're talking here about a Senate bill today, and that's where my focus will be. Now, interestingly, a lot of legislation that takes place in our United States Congress does in fact involve a second bill, a companion bill, brought up in the other chamber. And so what will typically happen is legislators from either the Senate chamber or the House of Representatives chamber will get together, they'll discuss legislation that they believe is important, and they will introduce very similar or identical bills on each side of the Congress, and they will then advance those bills through their respective chambers with the idea of having added momentum when and if those bills pass out of their particular chamber to the other side. At that point, there's already familiarity because the members of the other chamber have dealt with the companion bill, and so things tend to gain a little more traction. In this case, the same thing is going on. A similar bill has been introduced in the House of Representatives, sponsored also by a group of several Democrats. But interestingly, neither of these bills has any support from Republicans or independents. So they're what's called a fully partisan bill, meaning only one party is advancing these concepts. I've provided a link in the video description to the text of each of these bills so that you can take a look at those yourself. The overall gist and feel of these bills seems to be that they are focused on going after those who engage in activities that would tend to suggest they're people who value the right of freedom, who value the right to be able to protect themselves, and who value the right to be prepared to respond in the face of any sort of danger or other emergency. Arguably, these bills are focused on groups such as the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, others like that that have gotten notoriety in the press over the last several years as they have grown in popularity for taking a stance against organizations that were involved in things like the mostly peaceful protests of recent years. Really, it looks like these bills are focused on coming after people who have traditional values and who don't want to see the fabric of this great country torn apart. Let's take a look at the specific provisions of this bill that seem to cross a line largely on First Amendment grounds, but there's a lot that's at play here. So let's dig into it, and ultimately you can decide for yourself what you think about this. Senate Bill 3589 says, "It shall be unlawful to 1. Publicly patrol, drill, or engage in techniques capable of causing bodily injury or death." This provision seems to take a direct shot at anybody who might organize to take care of their home, their community, a neighborhood, perhaps a neighborhood watch group, maybe a police auxiliary group. But ideally, we're talking even about things as simple as a self-defender who is faced with a dangerous threat, chooses to act to protect himself against that threat, and under the provisions of this law would be able to be deemed a criminal because they engaged in activity capable of causing death. Well, the reality is when we're faced with a deadly threat, the law as it's currently formulated in the state of West Virginia and in most states allows you to meet that force with an appropriate level of force in response. That means if you face a deadly threat, you can engage in deadly force to protect yourself from that threat. But under the provisions of 3589, Senator Markey doesn't want you to have that right. Think about the mostly peaceful protests back in the summer of 2020 and a lot of the things that have happened ever since then. And we see instances where communities, towns, cities have been sieged by rioters, looters, people breaking into stores, burning places down. And we also see these side stories of business owners and community members coming out in force to try to protect their communities. Under this bill, those sort of actions, those efforts to protect their homes, their communities, would actually be considered a criminal activity. Nothing about that seems to be American. Nothing about that seems to support the idea that we have the right to gain and earn and work and obtain things in our lives, live in a nice place, and protect those efforts and protect those things from people who would want to come and do harm. But this bill is exactly empowering the government to come after people who have the nerve to take care of the things that they've worked hard for or the things that they value. Provision number 2 says that it shall be unlawful to interfere with, interrupt, or attempt to interfere with or interrupt governmental operations or a government proceeding. This provision basically says it's illegal to do something that's already illegal. We don't have the right to unlawfully interfere with government operations. But under the First Amendment, we absolutely have the right to assemble peacefully, and we have the right to protest. We have the right to speak out against our government and its actions, but we have to do it in a certain manner. To do those things unlawfully certainly is problematic. However, this bill is saying in just general terms, you can't protest the government. You can't interfere with government proceedings. Well, the reality is that is a limitation on the First Amendment right of assembly and right of free speech, which again gives us the ability to oppose our government as long as we do so in a lawful and orderly manner. This is absolutely a direct attack on the First Amendment. It shall be unlawful to interfere with or intimidate another person in that person's exercise of any right under the Constitution of the United States. It's currently illegal to violate another person's rights. We don't need a new law to tell us this. We do have a right to oppose another person, just like we do the government. We can oppose a private person, a private organization. We can challenge their positions, their views. We can advance our own views that are in opposition to what that person or group's views are. That's all legal. But under this law, if this passes, Senator Markey doesn't want you to have that right to be able to speak freely, to be able to speak your mind, to be able to call out somebody who you think is being ridiculous by telling them, hey, you're being ridiculous. We have that right now, but this is going to be taken away under this bill if it would ever have the chance of passing into law. This is dangerous. The bottom line is that we have to be able to freely criticize, we have to understand that through criticizing, we are also opening ourselves up to criticism from others. And that's okay. That's called discourse. That's called open debate. And when people do it rationally and maturely, that's called a discussion. And we should be able to have more of those discussions in this country. But right now it seems that if you take a different view from the prevailing thoughts in certain topics, you're a hate monger, you are racist, you're homophobic, you're all kinds of things that probably don't apply to any of us. But because the other side doesn't know how to argue, they get to say those things and think that it's their card, their trump card to shut us down. Well, the reality is that if this bill was to become law, they would be even more empowered to say that we were violating their rights because we didn't see things the same way. Number 4 says it shall be unlawful to assume the functions of a law enforcement officer, peace officer, or public official, whether or not acting under color of law, and thereby assert authority or purport to assert authority over another person without the consent of that person. Obviously, it's illegal to impersonate a law enforcement officer. We can't do that. If you do that, you can actually be charged criminally and face incarceration. So this bill isn't telling us anything we don't already know. But where this becomes problematic is when we may choose to act in a manner that's designed to protect ourselves, our family, our property against criminals who are coming to take away our rights. Imagine having someone break into your home and you hold them at gunpoint, call the police, and under this bill, the police come and they arrest you because you acted in a manner that's similar to what law enforcement does. One of the functions of law enforcement in the face of dealing with a dangerous person is to use force or the threat of force to subdue that person and get them into custody. By acting in that manner as a private citizen who's protecting your interests, protecting your own safety, this bill would seem to argue that you're doing the same thing. It's saying you don't have that right to protect yourself or others because doing so would be stepping into a role of acting as a police officer. While that's clearly not the case, you can begin to see that the nature of what this bill is really insidious. It digs deep into the fabric of the rights that we already have to take care of ourselves and says, no, you don't. That's not right. Anything that we do that an officer might also do in a dangerous situation could be construed as us acting outside the scope of the law under the terms of this bill. Section number 5 says that it shall be unlawful to train to engage in any activity described in paragraphs 1 through 4. Currently, it's not unlawful to train or practice to engage in any of these activities. Most of these things are oriented towards folks who would want to, say, take a self-defense class, study martial arts, take a firearms training program, maybe get together in a classroom setting and learn about things like tactics or emergency preparedness. All that's okay right now, but if this bill was to pass, all those things would likely be questioned as unlawful activity. The bottom line here is that this bill and its sponsors seek to make it unlawful for us to take care of ourselves, to train to take care of ourselves, to get better at being safe, productive citizens who are able to contribute to overall safety in our communities. Imagine being told that your martial arts school is no longer legal because it's organized in a rank type structure. There's formal training. There are multiple people involved who may have mutual interests, all because this bill says that kind of activity is in fact unlawful. This is ridiculous legislation. The reality is that I don't believe that it has a high likelihood of actually being able to pass through Congress and become law. But to me, the bigger concern here is looking at why is this bill being introduced? Why is it that both bills in the Senate and the House of Representatives are only supported by Democrats? This would seem to be an attack on again, conservative, traditional-minded Americans who do things that are just designed to make our lives better, designed to make our lives a little more functional, that are designed to make us feel safe, designed to help us be in a position to help others when they have a moment of need. But this bill goes after that. And to me, this is a deeper-seated issue that just illustrates the divide we've seen grown in our country over the last several years. And it's dangerous. The idea that things like this can be put forward with a straight face is concerning, and every one of us ought to be concerned about it. I urge you to reach out to your congressional delegation in your state. I've put in the video description below a link to all of the congressional delegation members here from West Virginia, our senators and our congresspeople. And I would encourage you, reach out to them. Let them know that you're aware of these two bills. Let them know how you feel about it. Let them know that these bills are not good for America. They're not good for the morale of this country at a time when morale is certainly so important. Let them know you don't support this, and tell them that you expect their opposition to these bills if they end up coming across their desks at some point. Please reach out and be a part of the solution here instead of just sitting back and relying on others to take care of it for you. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, share it with your friends. Let's get the word out there, and let's get some discussion going in the comments below. This is a really interesting topic, and it's one that I think should earn the engagement of a lot of folks. This is something that we all ought to be concerned with, we ought to know about, and we ought to be interested in wanting to get involved and make sure that our representatives know that we don't support this. If you have any questions after watching this video and maybe reading the bills, please feel free to get in touch. I'd be happy to speak with you about these issues and see if I can help guide you. In the meantime, I appreciate you stopping by. I hope you enjoyed the video. We look forward to seeing you the next time here on West Virginia Gun Law. Thanks again.